I am so excited that you have joined our Go From Grief to Glow Up Masterclass. I am so grateful that you are here and that you took the time out of your day to dive deeper into your own self-healing process. And this whole presentation is essentially about how it's important to have a mind, body, and spirit, soul level glow up. We talk about glow ups after heartbreaks or even difficult chapters of life, going through a dark night of the soul, going through a loss of a job or a death of a loved one or a breakup. They are hard and they impact our light. They can dim our light. And this presentation is all about using shamanic tools like soul retrieval to learn how to shine your light brightly after heartache, no matter what happens in your life, how to get that glow back on an internal level. Because it's when we change our internal experiences, when we change what's going on within, that we see lasting results on the outside, right? Healing is an inside job and it changes the vibrational frequency that we experience, our own personal happiness, but it also shines out into the world and attracts us more experiences that are in alignment with who we are in that healed, fully vibrational, like best experience of self. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. I know we talk about glow ups and it's like, okay, you go through the breakup, you go through this hard time. I know you just went through a breakup recently, Bora, you shared with us. You might think, okay, well, I want to look really good and hot on the outside. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to work out. I'm going to change my hair. And these things are all wonderful. They help improve our self-confidence. I am big on nutrition and, exercise routines. But if we only work on the outside appearance, if we only build up the sense of self on the outside and neglect the internal sense of well-being, then we tend to repeat the same patterns that gave us the heartbreak in the first place. And my job is to let you know that there's a different way to live, that you can use these ancient tools that have been around for hundreds of thousands of years because they work and are effective. And I wanted to share them with you today because they absolutely changed my life. I wouldn't be here with you in this way. I wouldn't be confident and smiling again after some of the heartbreaks I went through that I'm going to share with you a little bit about if I hadn't discovered these tools. So I'm excited. Welcome to our masterclass, and I'm going to share my screen and start showing some slides with you. So I'm really excited that you're here again. Let me know in the chat box what's going on for you. I will read those at the end after we go through our slide presentation. But again, you are here and in the right place if you are learning how to have that glow up after heartbreak, a difficult challenge or chapter of your life. We're going to be talking about that on all levels, but especially that internal space, that internal sense of self and soul. So I'm so excited that you're here. You are going to walk away learning more about the tools that you can use to heal yourself after heartbreak and really get your glow back, get your energy back, and live that best life that you want. So you are in the right place if you're an action taker and you do believe that you can change and edit your own reality simply by creating a new life for yourself. That you know that there is that ability to essentially call back your power and your essence and your life force. So you're here if you know that it's worth investing in yourself and worth working on yourself. And if you really want to feel free from the painful patterns of the past and break free to create that new life for yourself. So what we're going to learn today is why we feel so heartbroken after loss and heartbreak, especially breakups, and how to heal the root of it. Right? There are phenomenons where we can feel like we have that broken or shattered heart, where we feel like a part of us is missing. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. And we're going to go into this in detail. But if you are willing to break these old patterns and want to start manifesting the life and the love that you actually want, then you're absolutely in the right place. So I want to ask, does any of this sound familiar? Does any of this sound like you? Maybe you went through a difficult, challenging time in life. You just went through that breakup. You went through the loss of a job or a loss of something that your identity was tied to, and now you feel changed from that experience. Maybe you feel like you broke your heart, like some part of you is missing. Or maybe you feel like you can't quite get over that experience from the past. It keeps showing up in your current relationships. It keeps rearing its ugly head. Or you find that you keep coming up against something that's a cycle for you that you don't actually want to keep playing out, but it just keeps manifesting in that way. Then this is for you. Or maybe you've already tried lots of different self-help techniques. Maybe you've tried meditation. Maybe you've tried plant medicine. You've gone on those yoga retreats. You've done everything that you can, and maybe you feel amazing in that process, but then afterwards you get home and you feel like nothing is really shifting for you. The thing that you wanted to heal didn't actually budge, and you feel like you aren't getting the results that you want. Maybe you've done cord cutting. Maybe it's been talk therapy. Whatever that is, if you feel like those things aren't really moving the needle for this experience that you want to have, like manifesting healthier relationships or changing your patterns of luck, then this presentation is for you. And the good news about this is that we do have ancient shamanic tools that have stood the test of time that I'm going to be talking about with you today, that have been passed down from indigenous cultures. Many of our ancestors used these traditions, but we've simply forgotten about them. And my life's work, my purpose work, is to give people hope, to let them know that these ancient ways do offer opportunities for us to really heal the root of heartbreak so that we don't have to keep repeating it. And I want to give you some hope today, if nothing else, that you don't actually have to accept that you've changed forever and that you'll never be the same again. And I wish someone knocked me upside the head after some of my trauma and experiences in life and told me you don't have to just be this empty, void version of yourself. You can actually be that person who is empowered and call your energy back, which we'll be going into today. So if any of this resonates with you, rest assured you're in the right place, and I'm so excited to share these tools and these tips with you today. So my promise to you is that after this presentation, you'll understand the number one way to get your glow back and shine your light brightly again after heartbreak. And this ripples out into the rest of your world. Not only do you feel amazing when you use some of these ancient practices, but you also start to raise your energetic frequency and vibration to attract something different. And the same patterns that you were up against begin to dissolve and shift when we go to the root of what is causing them, which is what we're going to be talking about today using these ancient strategies. And this is the right place for you, even if you feel like the right relationship, your confidence, your power, all of the good, juicy things that you are aspiring to are just out of reach, right? Sometimes we feel like the universe is giving us these hopeful visions that we know of what's possible, but then we feel like it's just out of reach, like that carrot on the stick. And I'm here to tell you that even if you feel like you've been looking for these things but haven't been able to achieve them, that you're in the right place and you can attain these when you work on yourself on a soul level. And again, when you have your glow up, you'll spark your inner life light. You will heal those unconscious soul wounds and feel vibrant, whole, and free to attract the life that you actually want. And that's really what we're here for. We're here to live life to the fullest, to experience this planet, to experience it on a level where we get to enjoy it and be grateful for this experience and not stuck in stories of suffering like so many of us can be when we get hung up on parts of the past that didn't serve us and get stuck in those energies that simply can be returned to us, that we can reclaim. And we'll be talking about that. So some of the things that you'll understand through this presentation is that we all have these unconscious blocks. We all have this baggage and beliefs that are unconscious, sometimes conscious, that get in the way of living life to the fullest. And if we don't heal them and deal with them, then we can continue to pass these down. And this happens ancestrally. It can happen from multiple lifetimes. We can be stuck in painful patterns that we don't actually know the origin of, but we do know that we don't want them anymore and we're ready for something else. And this happens to all of us, the best of us, even those who don't really have a lot of hardship in their life. Everybody to some degree has some level of conscious beliefs, either that they've created in their childhood from unemotionally available parents, parents who weren't fully there for them, or if we manifest that into our adult relationships, there's always an origin of that wound that we can go to the root of and heal. And that's what we're going to be talking about with these ancient techniques. So if you don't know me already, I'm Kristen Von Fox. I'm a shamanic healer, practitioner, and I have my background in clinical psychotherapy and creative arts therapy. And I love the world of shamanism because it has helped me to heal the soul wounds that did not budge with the psychotherapeutic tools that I was using. And it also has given me the ability to really help my clients clear the subconscious soul blocks that have been getting in the way of their success so that they can be fully themselves, attract the things that they want in their life, and start to shift out of those patterns that don't serve them. So this is really powerful work. And I unfortunately had to learn this the hard way. It was heartbreak and heartache that cracked me open and took me through multiple dark nights of the soul to step more fully into my power. And it's in those darkest nights, those darkest times, that the universe really does pressure us so that we can have the opportunity to be pressurized into the diamond, right? We can create and transmute and alchemize our pain from the past into something that is worth living for, into our power and into our success. But it usually happens because we had to go through a difficult chapter of life that has defined us and allowed us to really blossom into who we are. And so for those of you who are going through heartache and heartbreak, my heart is with you in that. That's exactly what cracked me open. There have been some really defining relationships and horrible heartaches that I wouldn't wish on anyone that were actually the catalyst to pushing me into my life purpose, my path, that has put me in front of you here today to support you on your journey. So one of the biggest heartbreaks, I've had two marriages that activated me. And the first one was to my Scottish ex-husband. Oh my goodness, I knew him for 8 years. We met in Colonial, West Virginia at Busch Gardens Amusement Park. And if you have ever had a deep karmic soul connection, you might have had the experience where you are just so attracted to a particular person, a particular energy, and you just know that you have work to do with that individual. And that was me. The moment I met my first ex-husband, there was just such a strong draw. I had to know this person. And we had a beautiful vacation together on this family vacation. I was 17 years old. And then we stayed in touch for 8 years. He became my pen pal. We got in trouble for racking up the phone bill, talking internationally on calls. And it was both beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time, because after he came to visit me, after I graduated with my creative arts therapies degree, he wanted to get married and I wasn't really sure about it. He was so sure. And I'm such a big open-hearted person. Brianna, who some of you may know, calls these people the open hearts. And I was such an open heart that I didn't have a lot of my needs met in childhood. I had parents who were really cold and kind of mean. And I think I was trying to escape from the life that I had. And this person was just so good, almost too good to be true, that I bonded with this person. I thought he was going to be my knight in shining armor to take me away from this life that I didn't want to live with my family, to create the life and the family that I did want to be a part of. And unfortunately, he broke my heart and did a number on me when, after he married me, he became a completely different person. He emptied my bank account and fled the country, had an affair. I got to hear from his affair partners in Scotland when he got back, and it was devastating. And the hardest part of it was that afterwards, I felt so upset and I had to put on this happy face for everybody else. But underneath, I was shattering. And it was so hard because I had learned all of these psychotherapeutic tools in my healing practice, in my creative arts therapies healing practice, but it was so frustrating because none of the tools were actually helping me. When I leaned on the ones that I learned to use in these exact scenarios with clients, they were lackluster and they were not really supporting me on my journey. Instead, they were just helping me build the rest of my healthy ego that was intact, but ignoring the soul wounds that were on a level that these practices could not touch, could not shift for me. And that's when I realized that all that I had trained in, all that I was working with, was not actually enough to heal what happens to the human psyche, the human being on a soul level when trauma affects us. And so some of the things that I was feeling in that experience was I used to be so energetic and alive, and all of a sudden I was dead inside. I felt like a shell of who I used to be, and I laid in bed crying for hours a day in between my jobs. I was falling apart. It was months, and I was not able to pull myself together. And in this time, I became emotionally numb. I was checked out. I was not fully present. I was liftless, and I started to get really sick with a number of mystery illnesses that the doctors did not know how to help me with. So it wasn't just on an emotional level, it cascaded into my physical well-being. It cascaded into my mental capacities, brain fog. I was not fully who I was. And it was so hard because as a child, I had gone through a lot of difficult chapters in life. I had gone through a lot of abuse scenarios, and I could say that it was hard to delineate how different my life changed from being a kid to going through those chapters. But as an adult, going through this relationship that shattered my heart, I was very different because I used to be that energizer bunny. I had so much energy, so much confidence, so much life light that just got sapped completely from this experience, dimmed me out. And I no longer really liked who I was anymore. And I didn't really want to just settle for that being the only way that it could be in life. And it wasn't just me that was experiencing these situations where part of me was getting stuck in the past. Everything went back to that heartbreak that I experienced with my ex-husband. Everything revolved around this heartache and heartbreak. And I noticed that I was not alone in this process. I want to talk to you about one of my clients that I had as a creative arts therapist around this time, that I also noticed that so many of my clients were stuck in these stories that had disempowered them, which is really what we're talking about today. When we are affected by trauma and a part of our power, our energy, our focus, our light gets stuck in a past scenario, is given away to someone else, or is just fractured off and we become disconnected from it because we go through trauma. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about Ronald. Now, Ronald was one of my favorite clients in the creative arts therapies world. He was really fun to work with, and I noticed that all of the artwork that he was creating was all centered around brick buildings. I remember we were getting ready for an art exhibit, and he was just going through all of his art, brick after brick after brick after tedious brick. And if you've done artwork, you can imagine these tiny little bricks that he was creating. He spent hours just ruminating on these bricks. And one day I just wanted to get to the bottom of it. I sat down next to him. I said, "Ronald, what is with all of these bricks? You seem pretty obsessed. What is this really about?" And he told me, "Well, that's what I see when I think about myself." And that was the defining moment where I changed. He said, "I used to be so confident, Kristen, but then I had a horribly embarrassing experience that shattered my confidence, and I've never been the same since. And I guess now I just build brick buildings because it makes me think of that experience." And he told me the story, and the story was this. He was in the city. It was a snow day. He was a kid. I think he said it was 14 or 15 years old, and school was canceled. So all of the kids in the neighborhood were sledding just outside of his building, the brick building. And he was so stoked because his friends were there, but so was his crush, this girl that he had his eye on. And he was getting ready for his turn to go sledding down the hill. He wanted to look all cool and suave, especially for this girl he had a crush on. And instead of going down the path like everybody else had, he veered off in the wrong direction and went smack right into that brick wall. And not only did his friends point and tease, she also laughed. He was so embarrassed. And on top of that, his mother had been watching from the building, stuck her head out, pointed down at him and said, "I saw that," and laughed at him. And now everybody was laughing at him. And this caused him to feel incredibly deflated. It affected his ego, and he was obsessed thereafter with building brick building, focusing on the brick after brick after brick after brick. He said, "This is the moment that changed my life. And ever since then, I actually don't know how to be myself anymore. I don't know how to be confident." It affected me on so many levels. And what was so heartbreaking about Ronald is that he would get into these fits of rage, and he would go into the art studio and he would rip up all of his pictures. And it was right before we had this big exhibit he must have had like 25 different brick building art pieces and cityscapes, all of the buildings made of brick, and he shredded them to pieces right before in an angry fit because he was so frustrated over this moment in time that now appeared in all of his artwork that he was pretty much fixated on, because that was the place in the past where he had lost that piece of power. And this is what happens to all of this. This is an experience that I had with my ex-husband, who every time I would go through something and feel upset, I would just ask him, will you just hold me? You don't need to say anything. You don't need to do anything special. I would just love a hug. But he wasn't able to do it. He would just stand there and be frozen and very like emotionless and checked out, almost like he was unable to reach over, even pat me on the back, do anything to comfort me at all. And I remember just coming to him time after time to say, all I need from you is just a little bit of warmth and comfort. And he would always say, but my mom never gave that to me, so I don't know how to give it to you. And everything came back to, but my mom never loved me like that. My mom never did that for me, so I don't know how to do it for you. And unfortunately, there was quite a bit of a fixation on where his needs were not met by his mother, that they found that he couldn't meet his own needs. And it was very difficult in our partnership because he was not able to be emotionally available because of his own past that he kept getting stuck on. And it always came back to, but my mom never gave it to me. I need her to give it to me so that I could give it to you. And this is one of the signs that we are stuck in the past, is that we have been affected on a soul level from these experiences. And unfortunately, now that I know and have gone to the root to heal it, I had a father who was very much like my ex-husband's mother, and we replay patterns and we attract people to play out similar situations until we go to the root to heal it so that we don't have to be stuck in the past. So all of these cycles were continuing in my life, and I didn't know how to heal them with the tools that I now have until I discovered shamanism. And shamanism is honestly what changed my life. It took me out of the creative arts therapy, psychotherapy field and into the field of studying with indigenous cultures. I've studied with 16 different indigenous medicine men and women all over the world, some in indigenous societies that are off the grid, to learn how to address these soul wounds on a soul level, because none of the tools that I had were really getting to the heart of what I needed to heal for myself. And I was watching my clients talk about the same stories over and over and over and over and over and over again, but not actually having the ability to heal or move on from those scenarios. And I was stuck in the same boat. So I wanted to dig deep and understand how indigenous cultures address these soul wounds. How did they have tools that maybe we were missing in this modern world? And shamanism is the oldest spiritual belief system. It is not a religion. It is actually compatible with all religions because it predates religion. In fact, we can trace it back 40,000 years based on cave paintings and hieroglyphics and petroglyphs, although we know that the roots are even deeper than these paintings themselves, but that's all we can really carbon copy the date to. And these practices have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, not only because they work and are effective, but they have been passed down through the lineages so that we have the tools to address things on a soul level. And everything is connected on a soul level through shamanism. We believe that the grander web of life, the people, the plants, the trees, the animals, we all have souls, and our souls are all interconnected. And when there's a wound in the soul, that opens us up to being vulnerable to patterns that repeat, to energetic attack. We are vulnerable to physical illness. And this is what really is the root of shamanism, is that we do need to address all beings on the soul level, and that our souls transcend our bodies, that we have these beautiful experiences of being in body in this lifetime, but that we are all interconnected. And it's like the butterfly effect. One thing happens in one part of the world, it affects everybody, because we are all interconnected in the grander web of life. And it was through this particular lens that I started to realize that there are so many wonderful ways for us to connect in to our power using these ancient tools I'm going to be talking about today. And one of the biggest things that I learned through the shamanic lens is that when we go through these traumas, this phenomenon of disassociating from aspects of our confidence or our personality or personality traits of ours that we love, that we miss after we go through something, is called soul loss. It's this idea that when we go through a difficult chapter of life, a difficult experience, the part of the soul can disconnect from us and say, I'm gone, this is too much, and I'm going to leave. And this is done as a proactive response to protect our psyche, to protect who we are from these traumatic experiences. And unfortunately, in ancient times, we would have a medicine man or a medicine woman who, say the boy fell down the mountain, fell down the hill and harmed himself, got a physical injury. The shaman in the community would take the boy to the site of where that trauma happened within 3 days of that experience to help them retrieve the piece of their power that was missing. But now we go lifetimes, we go weeks, years, decades, generations without these pieces of our power, because there's not a lot of shamanic practitioners in this world. We don't turn to them to heal trauma. We turn to therapists and doctors instead of addressing those experts, those shamanic healers who specialize in mending the wounds of the soul specifically. So these are ancient practices that have been forgotten. There are still people that practice this work. It's still existing. It is really powerful work, but in my world, I didn't know about these tools and I had to go searching for them because they were so buried in these traditions I didn't have access to when I went through my psychotherapy training. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about that, right? The psychotherapeutic approach versus the shamanic approach, which are actually quite different. So the psychotherapeutic approach asks us to talk about the thing that happened, to revisit that experience through talk therapy usually. And one of the ways that that's stressful for us is that a lot of our impactful moments in life are stored in the hippocampus, the amygdala of the brain, the emotionally laden centers of the brain that actually don't use communication and words. They use feelings, a loud noise, a scream, a heartbreak. Those feelings get embedded into those sections of the brain. And for us to sit in front of a therapist to communicate about our experience of what happened forces us to rewire that information through our prefrontal cortex to develop language to communicate about it, which actually re-traumatizes that person and just dances around the scenario where they lost their power. And in this perspective, we were taught that, okay, this bad thing happened to the person, but there's still good parts of them left. So if we just build up the rest of their healthy sense of ego, then they should be more empowered and have more of a skill set to be self-aware to move through this situation. But in shamanism, we say we have to go to the root and bring back the part of the soul that disassociated, disconnected, and bring it back to reunite it with the person, because that's where it belongs to change the scenario. So instead of having to go through months and years of clinical psychotherapy, talk therapy, in one session, a few sessions, you can resolve energetic struggles and patterns on the soul level by just calling back the soul parts related to that pattern of wounding, related to the core wound that caused it. And when I work with clients, I don't just work on, okay, well, you're upset about this last heartbreak that you had. Instead, I go back and say, why did this heartbreak happen? Where does this originate? Where is the core wound that we can travel back to start to bring the healing forth by calling all of that energy back, whether that's ancestral, whether that's childhood wounding, whether that's something that happened last year. Right? There's different levels of trauma. There's also big traumatic experiences like a big car accident or a divorce. And then we have smaller traumas like being bullied in school or forgetting an important presentation the day that we have to present it, right? And sometimes we downplay the experiences that we've gone through that have shaped us and caused soul loss in some cases, when they are just as important as some of those bigger chapters of life that feel like they affect us more. It's important to know that we can lose little pieces of the soul, we can lose bigger pieces of the soul, and that they're all important to come back to be integrated with us. So now I wanted to get into the symptoms of soul loss, and I have a video that I wanted to share with you. I want to share with you the 7 sneaky signs of soul loss that indicate that you might be missing vital pieces of your soul and what to do about it. Sign 1, feeling like something is missing.
When shitty things happen in life, there are pieces of your soul who peace out, causing you to feel like literal pieces of your soul are missing. When the soul goes through stress, parts of your soul flee to protect themselves. In ancient times, cultures would have a shaman come and help that person reclaim the pieces of their soul that left during trauma within days of the tragedy. But nowadays, we don't go to shamans and healers. We go to therapists and doctors trained to treat the body or the mind, but nobody treats the soul. I was taught in grad school that soul loss was dissociation, and that according to the DSM, people who've been through trauma disconnect from vital parts of their personality, memories, and personal characteristics after experiencing a traumatic event. But we were never taught how to get these vital parts of the dissociated self back after, only how to build up other intact parts of their ego, not directly heal it. There weren't tools for that. Sign 2. Loss of physical energy or stamina. Losing pieces of your power zaps your energy. Not only can you dissociate from parts of your soul that got too scared to stick around for the rest of the situation you were in, soul loss leaves you feeling depleted and energetically vulnerable. Because I used to feel so happy and playful, full of energy, but for years after the trauma, I couldn't get in touch with any of those parts of my power. Sign 3. Loss of brightness in one's eyes, smile, or presence. Shakespeare said that eyes are the windows to the soul, and when soul loss happens, some of the eyes' light goes out. I notice the change when someone talks about something they're passionate about versus something that drained them or caused them soul loss. And the eyes become dull. Look at pictures of yourself before something tragic that happened and look into the mirror in your eyes after. Sign 4. PTSD. Those who've been through a traumatic event often experience post-traumatic stress disorder with symptoms such as difficulty sleeping, emotional detachment, agitation, flashbacks, hypervigilance, mistrust of others, and this happens to more than combat veterans. Think back to my graduate school roommate who was assaulted at the bodega across the street from our apartment. She was always bubbly and bright until the night that she was assaulted by the man in the bodega. My roommate was terrified. She didn't want to lead him back to our apartment across the street and feared he'd barge in after her. So instead, she ran to the train station on the corner of our block and onto the subway. She ended up riding the subway for hours, too afraid to come home in case he'd followed her or was waiting outside the bodega for her return. After the traumatic event, my roommate became very withdrawn. She stopped sleeping, stopped going out, she stopped talking to the neighbors, and began isolating herself. She had recurring flashbacks and even had nightmares. She was never the same after that incident, and she never went back to that bodega again. If you've experienced sleepless nights, flashbacks, bad dreams, agitation, anxiety, agoraphobia, or find yourself getting triggers by reminders of trauma, you may be missing a soul part too. 5. Memory loss. Some begin forgetting pieces of memory or have difficulty recalling memories from the past surrounding a traumatic event. This phenomenon is described as psychogenic amnesia, a phenomenon where memory recall becomes challenging surrounding extraneous events from a difficult period in life. When someone's gone through trauma, they may forget entire chunks of childhood, whether they were abused, had parents who fought all the time, or moved around a lot. They can have lost pieces of their soul that, along with the memories, they can't recall. Sign 6. Feeling stuck. It can feel hard to move forward if you're missing lost pieces of your soul. Many circle back to the same story of trauma where they lost a piece of their power and can't move on, like my friend Greg, who just couldn't open up in love after feeling betrayed by his ex who cheated on him years before. Greg clung to that story, sabotaging opportunities for pursuing healthy love relationships thereafter because he wasn't able to heal the serious soul wound. Sign 7. Attracting the same patterns over and over again. If it's not already shitty enough to experience heartache and hardship in the first place, we often attract the same cycles of suffering like we're on some crazy karmic hamster wheel. Like abusive partners if we've been abused as children. Like lovers who are unable to commit, are emotionally unavailable, or who always seem to abandon us when all we want to do is attract healthy relationships. Sometimes we can't shake patterns from our past, and that's why we manifest them in our present and our future. Did you know that those who've experienced childhood trauma are 70% more likely to keep attracting similar cycles of trauma in their adult relationships than those who hadn't experienced childhood trauma? Does any of this sound familiar? It's likely you may also have experienced some level of soul loss, and you may have even noticed some commonalities along those past experiences which leave you feeling confused and frustrated, especially if you've been trying super hard to make better choices but still seem to attract the same old cycles of the past. Once you understand how much a problem losing pieces of your soul is, and how much it affects your life and your joy and positivity and your energy levels for the rest of your life, it's like the missing pieces of the puzzle as to why you feel changed after trauma start to come together. The good news is you don't have to keep living life feeling depleted, missing your favorite parts of your energy, because there's an ancient strategy for reclaiming your passion, vitality, and joy for life, even after heartache and loss. Hi, I'm Kristen Von Fox, and I'm a shamanic practitioner with my background in clinical psychotherapy, and I sure know what it's like to feel changed after trauma, to walk around feeling less alive and like an empty shell of who I used to be, longing for who I was before the bad things that happened in life. And I thought that's just how it was. Trauma changes you, and I'd have to live this way forever, feeling drained, heartbroken, and lost. And despite my training as a psychotherapist, it quickly became clear that I didn't have the tools that were enough to help me or my clients get their power back and heal the very real wounds coming to the surface. I was in search of truth and a way to shift my energy from the past so I could stop attracting the same cycles of loss and help my clients feel more empowered. Instead of playing out the story of their trauma, I spent the next decade studying ancient indigenous cultures and how our ancestors addressed wounds of the soul. I found out that a core belief in many indigenous cultures is that when someone goes through trauma, they can lose a piece of their soul. I learned that soul loss is a natural phenomenon that happens as a self-defense mechanism for self-preservation. When parts of the soul dissociate due to trauma, they take with them pieces of your power or aspects of your personality and your energy, like the ability to trust and open your heart if you've been betrayed, or your confidence if a parent or bully puts you down. I also learned that we can give pieces of our heart and soul away to people we love without even knowing it, leaving an energetic emptiness behind. I knew I couldn't keep living missing important pieces of my power, so I started training with indigenous healers and researching everything I could get my hands on about shamanism and soul loss. I wanted to understand how I could get my power and passion back for life, so I'd never have to feel unworthy, unhappy, or stuck again. It wasn't until I studied shamanism and learned about a simple technique called soul retrieval that I started to feel alive again, stopped attracting trauma cycles, and started to see lasting changes in my life. Soul retrieval is an ancient healing practice where lost parts of one's soul are brought back after trauma. Shamans, or the indigenous medicine people, believe that if someone went through a challenging time, that part of their soul could disconnect as a natural defense mechanism to survive the situation. The problem is that after going through a difficult breakup, an accident, argument, or whatever agonizing experience caused the soul loss in the first place, the person would feel dull, changed, depressed, until they were able to be reunited with their lost soul parts. Once I started using soul retrieval, I was full of energy again, rather than an empty shell of myself. I was able to reclaim my lost pieces of my soul that left during my marriage, and lots of soul parts stuck in time from emotional abandonment and sexual abuse from my childhood. The benefits were amazing. Not only was I feeling more energized, empowered, self-confident, and alive, I was able to reshape the relationships and experiences I was attracting. I was able to reclaim my confidence, my ability to stand up for myself and draw healthy boundaries and attract healthier relationships. The parts of me that trust and want to be touched that had left me when I was abused as a child came back, and I became innocent and cuddly again, which drastically improved my relationships and allowed me to, for the first time in my life, really receive love. Soul retrieval brought me back so much vitality, passion, and focus. I shifted directions from psychotherapy to study shamanism and help as many people as possible with the new tools I found. And that's when my clients all started to experience the same levels of breakthroughs as me. Soul retrieval was creating huge shifts for my clients, and that's why I've created the tools for self-healing with soul retrieval.
So we talked about some of the symptoms of soul loss. And again, soul loss happens, this is going to answer your question, to essentially protect us, to protect the rest of our soul so that we can make it through the rest of that situation. Because oftentimes if we get mired in the sadness or the overwhelm, then we won't make it through the situation. So again, we were always meant to get these soul parts back. We were not meant to go more than a week or two without our energy back. And now we go lifetimes, we go generations without these pieces of our power, and it does affect our life light. I wanted to answer Bora's question. She says, I have a question about the concept of soul loss. You said part of the soul leaves the body in response to something traumatic to protect the person. I'm having a hard time seeing how part of the soul leaving the body can be protective. Okay, so I'll tell this story because this is a really good demonstration of that. And again, remember that in ancient times, we weren't meant to go years, lifetimes, weeks, months, generations without that part of our soul. There would be someone in the medicine community who would help us within days of that experience to call back that part of our power. And so I'll illustrate this. I think you'll understand this with a case study. Trigger warning, this does discuss taking one's own life or an attempt to do so, in case that's something that I'm just going to be tender around that subject. So I was working with a client a number of years ago, and she came to me after about 5 or 6 years of feeling completely emotionally numb. And her story was this. She was happily married for 15 years. Her husband was struggling with some depression, but she wasn't taking it too seriously. Her and her daughter went on a trip to visit her sister, and on that trip, when they were leaving, something didn't feel right. In fact, her daughter was also bothered by it. Their stomachs hurt, things didn't feel good, and they said, we have to go home. We don't know what's going on, but something is not right. So when they went home, they discovered that her husband had just attempted to take his own life. And when she walked into the room where he was attempting to do so, she had a part of her soul completely just disconnect from her and get stuck literally in the doorway of his study. And I know that because I went back to retrieve this part, and I went there to talk to that part. And the thing that was so ironic was that she was very happy-go-lucky in life until this happened. And her husband was the one who was depressed. But after he attempted to take his own life and did not die because she was able to successfully put aside her feelings to essentially handle it, call 911, do CPR, and bring him back into his body. And his experience was that he had a second life, lease on life, and was so excited and so happy that he became this new, fresh person that loved life and embraced it to the fullest. But now my client was stuck completely emotionless and numb, checked out, not fully present. And that's why she came to me, because she said, now he's doing great, but I'm not. And ever since this moment happened, I have been changed from this experience. And so when I went into the altered state of consciousness to do this work, I found that part of her soul was standing in the doorway. And that part of her said to me, I had to leave so that she could save his life, because I represent all of her emotions. And by golly, I am so angry that he did this. I would be so overwhelmed with anger, with sadness, with grief, with hysteria, that I would not have been able to go and physically save his life in that scenario. And that's what was warranted and needed. So I decided to disconnect and stand here waiting to see if someone would come back for me, because his life is more important than my emotions, right? And this is that experience of, we go into autopilot around trauma. I had a near-death experience this past summer, and this happened with my partner. He was on the kayak next to me. I had a rupture internally. I passed out right away. My boat tipped, and he saved my life in that moment. And when I came back into my body after having this beautiful near-death experience that was very cosmic, and I met my ancestors, and it was, wow, it was really something. He was so cold and detached. And the reason being was the shock that he went through, the mini soul loss that he had to go through to be able to put aside his emotions and not panic to save my life, just as my client had to put that aside to save her husband's life, is part of what disconnects as a way to survive. So that we don't break down, so that we don't collapse into the emotions that can be so overwhelming and keep us stunned. It allows that part of us to disconnect because it's just too much, and the rest of us to go forward so that we can continue on. And again, this is good for us because it helps to protect the rest of our ego. This is the reason, one of the other symptoms of soul loss is that you could be missing chunks of your childhood or chunks of memory around a particularly difficult time, because when soul parts leave, they leave with confidence. They leave with aspects of our personality, our self, our sense of self, and who we are. And when those parts leave, they also can take with them the memory. So one of the things that's happened as a result of soul retrieval, I can speak to my personal process, but one of the things that happened was I had a lot of childhood wounds that came back from a period of time where I had been abused from 5 to 8. And that was a huge shift for me. All of a sudden, I became really cuddly and I trusted again. And it allowed me to be more present in my relationships because I had those pieces of my trust back, those pieces to see that I'm like a snuggle muffin. When I was afraid of touch, if someone touched me, I would just kind of like stiffen up like a board and just think like, okay, this is my boyfriend. I should be happy. He has his arm around me, but instead I'd be frozen in place. But after these soul retrievals, I started to have like visions or remember what my parents' house looked like before they remodeled it. That's something I just wouldn't normally think of, but I had memories of what it looked like in the kitchen before we redid it, which I didn't often think of because I thought about the remodel that happened later in life. And then I started to think about the TV downstairs. We had this really old TV and it had these glass doors that snapped into place over it. And that's where I would watch Felix the cartoon, Felix the cat cartoons. And all of a sudden I was having these memories of joyful times in my childhood that left because of the trauma that happened. And so we can have chunks of childhood memories, chunks of memories, just have like a fuzzy awareness, not really be clear on the details anymore, forget periods of things that happen. We can black out. We can be missing these memories because they left with that aspect of our soul that also left to protect itself. So I hope that that allows you to understand some of the ways that this can work. Another symptom is that we are longing for something in the past, longing for a person. We're going to talk about soul stealing in just a few minutes and how if someone has a piece of your soul, you can feel almost addicted to them because you want to be closer to your energy to feel whole again if that person took it. And we're going to explore that a little bit more. Thanks, Laura. You do understand now. Yes. And so again, remember, we were supposed to be getting our power back after these experiences so that we could move through life. Another example is I worked with a woman who was kidnapped. And she was kidnapped by a friend of hers, and it was really scary. And I remember after the soul parts came back, one of the things that came back, they came back with a little bit of a warning level. They always come back with gifts. They come back with aspects of our personality. They come back with aspects of who we truly are, our light, our vitality, our essence. And they can also come back with a little bit of a warning of now that the soul part is back, you are going to be more in touch with this part of you that has been missing. And in this case, the part of her that came back was anger, it was passion, it was all of these feelings that were associated with that period of time that were lost. And I remember seeing her at an event, I think 2.5 weeks after the soul retrieval session, and I asked her how she was doing because I remember I gave her this little warning that these soul parts are going to have a lot of feelings and not to be overwhelmed by them, but just to integrate them. And she said that it was so intense because she was like really angry and passionate and horny all at the same time. And then she said as soon as she acknowledged them, they just integrated, and then she felt like she was balanced because she felt emotionally numb for years of her life since that experience. And so when we call back these parts of ourselves, like we call back the trust that was lost in a relationship, or call back the part of our inner child that felt betrayed or left behind because our parents were too busy to make time for us, then we call back these parts of us that honor our self-worth, our self-value. We know who we are. We have our ability to speak up if that's what was taken. And this is all these very vital and important pieces of our soul that essentially help us to come back to more fully be who we are and who we are meant to be in this world. So it's important to get those soul parts back. So I'm going to pull up my screen again and share the rest of the slides with you. And I told you we were going to talk about soul stealing, so I want to talk about it here. Soul stealing absolutely happens in lots of different relationships and can happen in situations that we don't even notice that it's happening. So for example, I work with clients. I have, we all have sibling rivalry to some degree, but sometimes siblings will steal part of their siblings' power. I've seen that happen with mothers who are so drained and so tired that they steal the lifelight from their children. And one of my main teachers, Sandra Ingerman, always used to talk about when she got her energy back after soul retrieval and felt so empowered and inspired that she could feel herself walking into rooms where people would get jealous and almost try to like siphon energetically vampire their energy and steal some of their soul parts. And I learned about this when I worked with the Shipibo people in the Amazon jungle. They talked about it a lot. In fact, this is a really common practice in indigenous cultures where chiefs of a particular tribe who wanted to take over new regions would oftentimes do psychic attack and would try to steal energy from their opponents, because it was believed that if you lose parts of your soul, if part of that is affected, then you become vulnerable to bad luck, to illness, to dis-ease, and to attack. And so this was one of the ways that they would try to take other people's power so that they could have the upper hand in a situation. And although these are rituals and things that people do consciously in many cultures, so much of it happens unconsciously that we are not aware of, that we're not even trying to do, which is why I like to bring this up. You can be in a power play, power dynamic relationship with someone who always wants to win, have the upper hand. You can be in a situation with a toxic relationship and someone who's narcissistic, who is trying to gaslight you or steal your energy so that you feel like you're going crazy. That diminishes your confidence in yourself, in your mindset. And so this happens in so many ways, consciously and unconsciously. And I wanted to come clean with y'all right now and say that when I first learned about soul stealing, I thought like, oh, I love everybody. Like, I have such a big heart. Like, I would never do that to anybody. And when I first learned about this and I meditated on it, I found that I was actually holding on unconsciously to a soul part in like a very loving way from one of my ex-boyfriends. Now, we dated on and off through college. We were very close, and I was unconsciously holding on to a part of him because he made me feel safe, and I wasn't even aware of it. We hadn't been dating for years. We were still friends. We saw each other from time to time, but we lived in 2 different states. And when I found that I was holding on to a piece of his energy, I felt so sad and really like guilty and terrible about it. So I called him up. I went outside and I said, hey, what are you doing right now? And he said, oh, I'm outside. I just finished mowing the lawn. What's up? And I was like, okay, this is going to sound really weird, but like I have to do something real quick. Can you just put the phone down? Like, it's going to be quiet for a minute, but I just need to return something to you energetically. And he was like, what? Oh, okay. You didn't really know what to do about that. And I remember doing the ceremony, bringing his part back, sending it back. I had just learned soul retrieval. I was aware that I was holding on to a piece of him and I returned it. And, then we got on the phone after that and just chit-chatted about life. And I didn't really go into what happened because I didn't really think he would know what to say to that or how to integrate that or be on the level of understanding what I was doing, because he wasn't so much about like shamanism or soul stuff. He was more analytical. And so I just let it go. And he called me a week or 2 later and he said, Kristen, you are my good luck charm. I don't know what you did with me on our last phone call a week or 2 ago, but ever since then, I'm waking up every day with so much energy. I feel so vibrant. I am so happy, like happier than I felt in years. And I just got scouted for this awesome new job and I am on cloud 9 and I'm calling you my good luck charm because everything good started happening to me as soon as you got on the phone with me and did that call. And I was like, oh my God. Okay, well, actually I have to come clean and tell you that I didn't realize I was holding on to a piece of your heart. And I am so sorry. And I called you to give it back. And he said, tell me more. That's so weird. And then he went on to say that he thought this was crazy. He didn't understand how to describe this, but he hated being outside in the heat. He was like one of those like clammy hands, sweaty guys. And he told me that when I told him to stay outside, he was annoyed at me. He's like, oh, I just mowed the lawn. I'm all hot and sweaty. I don't want to be out here any longer. But he decided he trusts me. So he's like, okay, I'll let you do your thing. And he said, as I was retrieving that part and I was rattling, he could hear some sounds on my end. He felt this cool breeze come. And instead of blowing past him, it surrounded him. And he said, I expected the breeze to just go away, but it clung around me. And it felt like I had my own little air conditioning unit. And it felt so good. It was unlike anything I've ever felt or experienced before. And at that point, he said he went to bed with so much energy. He woke up with so much energy. And his life changed after that. That once I told him the work I was doing and shared a little bit more about my shamanic practice, he actually booked some soul retrieval sessions with me. me. We healed something from another ex-girlfriend of his that was incredibly traumatic that he had told me about years ago. And right after we healed that wound that was blocking his love life, he manifested a romantic partner. They got married a couple years ago. They just welcomed their second baby into this world. And so this work is so powerful, and it can happen in so many different ways, and we can be unconscious that people can have a power over us. There's been so many soul parts I've had to get from my sister, from my father, from different people in my life that I gave my power away to unconsciously. And so when we call back these parts of our energy, we call back our vitality, it does change our luck, it changes our energy, and that changes everything around us. So I had to talk about soul stealing because a lot of us have done it unconsciously or have had people do that to us, even from that place of love. I've had people, you know, my boyfriend now, he'll be like, I want to give you this piece of my heart. And I was like, don't you dare. You keep it for yourself so you can love me. So now I'm really cognizant of when people say, I'm giving you my heart, I'm giving you a piece of my soul. And I was like, don't you dare. I don't want a piece of your soul. Just want you to be soulful and love me from a full tank of love. Right? So I had to talk about soul stealing because it happens on so many levels, and it does weaken our vitality. And we can also address this when we use the practice of soul retrieval. So we also want to talk about how these ancestral wounds can get passed down. And I don't think that you would be in this workshop right now if you weren't an ancestral trauma cycle breaker. I truly believe that you would not be attracted to my work, to be attracted to this topic, if you weren't one of those powerful souls that was chosen in your ancestral lineage to shift out of the patterns that may have been passed down to you and to break them so that you don't have to pass them down through your family tree. Now, they've done studies with rats in Nature Neuroscience in 2013. They published a study that showed that we absolutely pass down trauma through our DNA to our offspring. And they did this study initially with rats where they presented the ancestral rat, the original rat, with the scent of cherry blossom while they simultaneously shocked the rat's feet in the learning chamber. So again, a stimulus of the cherry blossom scent at the same time as the shock under their feet caused them to have a hormonal stress response that they were able to measure and see the fear response in this rat. Well, then they took this rat out of the learning chamber and they allowed it to mate, and they measured 5 generations of offspring from that original rat where they did not shock these rats, but they merely gave them the scent of cherry blossom and measured an equal energetic, physical, hormonal stress response in the absence of the shock that showed that up to 5 generations, again, they only tested 5, so we don't know how far these traumas can be passed down, these patterns can be passed down, but we do know that it gets stored in our DNA, goes to our offspring, and that's something that I've experienced with a lot of my clients. I've had clients who have had ancestors who went through the Holocaust or went through the Great Depression, and it affected their mindset around scarcity, around abundance, around their own empowerment. I've worked with clients who have been children whose parents are alcoholics and they struggle with alcoholism, right? We can have physical ailments that are passed down through our genes. Depression, they say, is hereditary. Well, sometimes it's because there's a trauma that was hereditary and our ancestor did not have the tools, the awareness, the safe space to be able to reclaim those aspects of their power so that they just get passed down to future generations. And instead of fully coming into our power, we then are separate from pieces of it. And so it's important to know that what you might be experiencing, any particular patterns, any cycles that you're like, where did this come from? They can oftentimes be passed down intergenerationally. So it's good to look at the cycles that your parents have created. What is the legacy that they're handing down to you? And the legacies can be good or they can be negative. And we want to make sure that we are stopping those patterns so we don't have to keep passing them down to our children and leave them with the burden of these burdens that we did not heal. And again, if you're here, I truly believe that anyone who's attracted to this vortex that I'm in with these tools, that you would not be here if you weren't a powerful being that was also meant to break some of these cycles so that you could liberate yourself and your future and your kids, right? We don't want to pass these down to our loved ones. We want to break them now so we can pass down a more positive legacy. Another thing that's really important to know is that these cycles can often be passed down across lifetimes, that we can have these experiences where we essentially have a wound from a previous lifetime that gets passed down and into our present day experience. And I came from a fundamentalist Christian background. I was not able to believe in reincarnation initially. It went against my core beliefs as a child that I was reared with. And I started to believe in reincarnation when I started to do this work for clients, because sometimes the origin of their wound would take me to a previous lifetime where they had either been persecuted for speaking their voice, or they had gone back to a cycle with a particular partner that they were looking to heal a wound around that actually went back to previous lifetime contracts, previous rodeos with the same soul group, the same people. And so it's important in my work now that I go to the root of where that person needs to heal, to call back those parts of their power, because oftentimes we can have those embedded in previous lifetimes that are affecting us now and that we need to heal to break free in this lifetime. And one of the examples I have is that I was working with a gentleman. He told me he had a really painful injury in his shoulder that he didn't really know where it came from. And he said, you do the soul work, but can you help me on the physical level? And I said, yeah, let's try. Let's give it a shot. And as soon as I tapped into that part of his body, I was taken back to 2 different lifetimes where he had been murdered through that place in his body. He had a sword driven into him right there. I also had a client who was like having injuries in one of his legs, and he kept wondering why these injuries kept playing out. And I saw multiple lifetimes where he had injuries to that particular leg. So you don't just lose soul parts for your energy, but you can also lose them for body parts, the soul of certain body parts. Again, we are such interdimensional, dynamic people that we can have soul losses that happen to very, very specific systems in our body, right? Someone could go through a car accident and they can lose the ability to have feeling in a certain part of their body, right? Soul parts can leave for aspects of the body as well. And the great thing about this client who I helped with the shoulder injury is that he called me 2 days later and he said, I can't believe it. He was a physical therapist. He's like, I can't believe it. I can do the exercises. I can lift my arms up over my head to show my clients how to do the exercises. And no time in my entire life have I been able to raise that arm without pain and full mobility. So that was such a big shift for him. And he was able to experience that shift. I'm just jumping into the chat now. Kimberly said, I felt a confirmation when you said you believe the ones you were here above our ancestry agreed not to leave children with a burden, true and powerful being here for a reason. Exactly, yes. And so it's important to know that we are meant to shift these cycles, that truly, again, within 3 days of the trauma, we would be healing it with these rituals, these techniques. But now we've forgotten about how to use them. And so there's a backup of healing that we've got to do, and sometimes for our ancestral cycles. So I wanted to talk briefly about what happens if we don't treat these soul losses, if we don't address these core wounds of the soul. And I did speak a little bit about how shamans and indigenous cultures believe that all illness, all disease, all cycles of bad luck, all of these patterns, all of the illness happens because there's an illness or a void in the soul, and the universe does not like voids. They like to fill them. So if you can imagine that puzzle piece is a part of your experience where you lost confidence, or you lost your ability to trust in relationships, or you believed in your own self-worth, that's the puzzle piece that has gone. And what it leaves behind is the wound, the vulnerable part, right? This is the part that shamans, or I don't want to say shamans, let's just say like chiefs of indigenous communities, would use this as, this person has a weak spot. I'm going to try to drive dark forces into that part of that person, which I would never suggest doing. I actually hate that when I went down to study with the Shipibo people, they were still talking about doing this. I'm like, this is so evil and horrible. Like, let's just heal these wounds and not try to exploit them. But people can start to attract patterns of relationships with people that exploit those wounds, because They want to either feel empowered. They're not really helping themselves and healing their soul wounds. They're the driving force to cause harm to other people. But if we have that wound that is open, there's not a piece of our power that is there plugging that space up, we become susceptible to people who are exploiting us to replay these patterns, almost always unconsciously. We can attract bad luck. We can attract other dark energies. We can become a magnet for dense, sad energies, right? If we're feeling sad, we're feeling wounded, then the universe is going to send us something that matches that vibration of what is left behind. And people will try to fill these voids with all sorts of things. People get creative, right? Shopping, food, sex, substances, but we can't really fill those voids that are puzzle shaped for our particular piece of power. We can only fill them with things that aren't us and are actually not going to bring us more joy, align us with who we really are. So it's important that we don't just fill this energy with someone else's power, but we fill it with our own so that we can be fully ourselves, radiate that higher frequency, not the wounded frequency, but the frequency of our power to attract the things that we want into life. Now, a girlfriend said to me a couple of years ago, I've shared this before, that if you're on a cycle, if you're not happy with the cycles in your relationships, in your life, in your job, things that keep repeating, when are you going to get off the ride? This was some of the best advice she ever gave me when I called her and saying, I don't know if I should leave this one relationship. This is like a decade ago. And she said, well, you have the chance to go on the ride, see if you like it. And there's always that opportunity when the train or the roller coaster comes back into the station, you have the opportunity to get off the ride and try something new. But sometimes the ride is thrilling, right? Like the new relationship, you get on that, you go up the hill, you go down, it's a thrill, you go up and around, maybe upside down, and you pull into the station. And you can choose to continue to play out the cycles because you know where they're going. You know where the track curves and it dips and it goes upside down. You know that ride can be thrilling. But is that really what you want? Do you want to keep playing out the same scenarios because you have something left to heal? Or are you ready to pull into the station and get off the ride and say, I'm going to work on myself so I don't have to keep going on the same trajectory through the patterns that don't serve me anymore? Now, I love it because we don't have to stay stuck in these old patterns. We do have these shamanic tools that actually help us to fully heal ourselves and step into this new version of who we are and who we're really meant to be. And that's why I love these shamanic tools, because they help us take our power back from the past so that we can be whole and fully who we were before these things that happened to us, but with the wisdom of the lessons that also taught us, but with that energy back intact, which helps us to raise our energetic vibration so we can attract the relationships and the energies that we want that aren't coming from that wounded place left behind from that puzzle piece, but really allows us to be in tune with our power because we have ourselves back, our vibrant energy. And can you imagine what your life would be like if you had access to all of your energy, this passion, this joy that left? Because I've had so much success with my clients over the years. I wanted to share some of their testimonials with you about what their experience has been with soul retrieval. Pat from Georgia says, I am back in my body and simply me. It, meaning soul retrieval, is a powerful healing modality I've ever experienced and has truly saved my life. Pieces of my soul were stuck in the trauma and have now come home. Kristen is so gifted, it defies comprehension. The work that she does is so pure, loving, and can help anyone. And Pat had a beautiful transformation and really came back to themselves after a very difficult chapter where they were told by a doctor that their trajectory was very short and they lost their touch with who they really were. With that news, that soul retrieval helped to bring them back, and they were just like a lightning bolt of energy back into their body. Michael says, the changes I noticed were pretty much instant in a really unexpected way. After the soul retrieval, I felt like I could handle damn near anything. I feel more complete and whole, which I had never really expected to happen going into this. And I love working with the skeptics because they've had big shifts. I've had friends who are like, I don't believe in what you do, but I want to support you, 12 years ago. And they had some of the biggest, most profound experiences because these soul retrievals did shift their energy. Melissa says, soul retrieval with Kristen is truly a profound and transformational experience. Kristen brings about changes, integration, and growth in a way that therapy, coaching and other healing cannot. She can do in an hour what it takes other methods years to attempt. She is truly gifted and creates a deeply effective and impactful healing experience. I feel more energized, empowered, joyful, and free. Ayanna says, immediately after the soul retrieval, I felt a charge dance through me as if I were really in my body. This was amazing in itself because along with the depression, I felt like I was walking around half a person. I am no longer a scattered puzzle. And I had an anonymous person who said, I immediately felt a sense of aliveness I haven't felt in 20 plus years. She literally gave me back to myself and made me feel whole. I began attracting a different type of men whom I feel safe with. I was now able to open my heart and trust again. And because of this, a great man came into my life who is everything I have wanted in a partner. And they love to work with my clients because every soul retrieval is so different. It's based on what it is that they are calling back. And essentially the benefits are based on what it is that you're looking to heal. I've had people have their confidence, their sense of self-worth come back, people who were unable to speak up and share their truth and say what they needed to say because that was blocked, open up for them. And it's different for everybody based on what it is that they are specifically retrieving. There is no one size fits all. I have learned so much about the world of shamanism and my clients through these practices, and it is so wonderful because it's not re-traumatizing, like sitting through years of psychotherapy without the results. I mean, gosh, I was a clinical psychotherapist and I jumped ship on those practices because this is what was working for me and working for my clients. Because the real glow up is when you have not just the body, mind on board, but you're also addressing the wounds of the soul. And I wanted to let you know that I am now accepting new clients into one-on-one healing packages. I had taken a break for a while, only teaching group workshops, and now I'm open for one-on-one work inside several session packages. And I wanted to let you know that you can book a call with me to essentially set those up and learn if these tools are right for you. I'm going to set that in the chat so that you have a link if you do want to book a call and do want to connect with me. So if you are curious, book a call with me. We can chat about it. And I'm so excited for your glow up. I hope that this inspired you and gave you a little bit more of an awareness of why you could be stuck in the past and what you can do about it so you don't have to linger in that space forever. I'm so excited that you spent some time with me today, and I am going to send you some big hugs for your integration of this presentation, and I hope to talk to you all soon. So big hugs, everyone. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see y'all later. Thank you. Nice to see you. Bye.